If we don't want those things, we shouldn't sin, right? That's easy concept to fully grasp. If we don't want misery, don't do that which brings misery. Sin. However, we feel the effects of sin even if we don't commit them, because we feel the effects of other people's sin. Misery loves company. So, just not sinning is not going to do it either. Besides, we could try to not sin all we want, but then we break once, we become a sinner. In fact, we feel the effects of an Adam and Eve sin even today, even though we never knew them. Man's greatest need is forgiveness, because we can't just stop sinning. We just can't get a do-over. We can't expect to be in a relationship with God if we have violated His very person. We need Him to forgive us. And this is exactly what salvation means. It means forgiveness, redemption. Think of this. When Jesus was born, an angel said His name should be called Jesus, Yeshua, salvation. Why? Because the angel went on to say, because He shall save His people from their sin. He recognized that the ultimate need of man is saving from sin. Not social blunders, but from sin. Not political intrigue, but from sin. Many are not forgiven because they really don't think they've sinned bad enough to need forgiveness. I mean, I'm not as bad as I could be after all. You ever thought that way? I could be worse. Well, I know I could be a lot worse. That's not because I'm not bad, it's just because I know what I could do. But think of it this way. If someone sins more than another, does that somehow make him not a sinner? I mean, if you sin more than me, does that make me not a sinner anymore? Or since we all can, well, most of us can associate ourselves with understanding the concept of chocolate cake. If I eat a piece of chocolate cake and you eat an entire cake, does that negate the fact that I ate the piece of chocolate cake? Just because you ate more? The idea being there, comparing ourselves to others or suggesting we're better because we're not as bad as this or that is ridiculous. One sin still makes us a sinner. Just like one piece of chocolate cake still makes me a chocolate cake eater. It's what happens. How does comparing ourselves with others make us not sinners? If we have sinned, we are sinners and we need salvation. Friends, we'll find out in Romans, all have sinned. So we need salvation, forgiveness from our sin to enjoy an eternal relationship with Jesus Christ. So I'm very thankful that this gospel, Paul stood here because this gospel, it satisfies man's deepest need, forgiveness. It's for salvation. But also it provides for man the greatest solution. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. That word power is a Greek word dunamis. We get our word dynamite from that word. It doesn't mean that this word in the original meant explosive. But what it does have the connotation of is that which does something. In fact, another translation of this word power is the word ability. Think of that word ability there. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. The gospel of Christ. It is the ability of God to save. It is the power of God unto salvation. By the way, that's the greatest solution because I have learned over and over and over again in my life that I don't have the ability to forgive like I need to forgive. And I don't have the ability to be forgiven by my own deeds, by my own works, by my own efforts. I don't have that ability. I don't have the power. And I'm very thankful this passage says it is the power of God. It doesn't say it is the power of man unto salvation. It is my power unto salvation. Paul doesn't say, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is my power unto salvation. He doesn't say that, does he? He says it's the power of God unto salvation. The hedonist says he doesn't need salvation. He'll find satisfaction elsewhere. The religionist sees the need for salvation, but seeks to meet that need not by the power of God, but by his own. By his own religion, by his own works, by his own deeds. So, many people work and work. They do this ritual, obey this decree by their authorities. They jump through this hoop, follow these 5 tenets, or so on and so on, all in hopes that they have exercised enough ability, enough power to be accepted by God. But my friends, can our ability and efforts ever impress God who spoke the world into existence? That's power. Can my power ever impress him? How could my measly doing good and performing my tithe or my church attendance or my sacraments ever impress one who is perfect and has no need of any works of righteousness? Friends, you will come to the door of salvation, the doorstep, the door of absolute forgiveness for sin and complete pardon, and never enter in if you're seeking to enter in by any power other than the power of God. You come so close and never pass through. I believe there will be many who will stand before God in the day of judgment and say, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? Have we not done many marvelous works? And he will say unto them, depart from me, I never knew you, you workers of iniquity. That's what Jesus said that would happen. There are those who are doing everything they can in their power to get that salvation. But we find here that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. No religious experience, no religious feeling or effort can bring the power of God unto salvation. Only the sovereign, divine, regenerating work of God can give us eternal salvation, eternal forgiveness. It's not gained by man's efforts, even after all that we can do. We will be found lacking. Don't trust anything but the ability of God to save your soul. But thirdly, this gospel answers man's most important question. By the way, this is pretty logical, I think. The need, salvation. The means, the power of God. The most important question is, how do I get it? How does this work for me? I mean, that's all fine out there in the abstract, but what about now? What about my sin? What about my lies? What about my lust? What about my problems? Look at Romans 1:16. Look at it again. And look at the glorious, beautiful words. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. And look what it says. To every one that believeth. Then he specifically says it came to the Jews first at the day of Pentecost, and as these Romans well know, it spread to them, even them, the Gentiles, the Hellenized. To everyone that believeth. And then jump with me over to verse 17. He says, for therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. As it is written, the just shall live by faith. By the way, faith is the noun form of the word believe. It's the meaning of the same word, same idea. And so we find 4 times in these 2 verses, he emphasizes, it's only by faith. Martin Luther, a Catholic monk, was studying to teach the Bible to a group of students. And he was studying Romans, and he was determined he was going to teach them Romans. By the way, he lived as a hedonist in his life until he was so afraid of his own sin, the reality of his own sin, and in a lightning storm, lightning landed just near him, and it scared him half to death. And he cried out, as a good Catholic would do, he cried out, Saint Anne, help me! I will become a monk! And so he went to the monastery. And he tried the religionist side for a while. Was a hedonist, tried that, still couldn't get over that burden of sin, so went and tried the religion. And so as a monk, as he was studying to teach Romans, he never got past verse 17. He never got past the phrase, the just shall live by faith. Martin Luther confessed his sin before God, and the light came on by the power of the Holy Spirit, and he believed only in the saving work of Christ through faith, instead of his religion, his works. From Martin Luther's faith, he became an outspoken advocate for salvation, as to put it in the Latin, sola fide. Faith alone. Faith alone. No works. No works to gain salvation. Faith alone. And through his outspoken and his friend Melanchthon, his writings as they studied together, came what became known as the Protestant Reformation, whereby this truth of faith alone spread around the world. And you know where it mostly impacted the world? The soon-to-be United States of America. One verse, one phrase, the just shall live by faith. It's a quote from Habakkuk 2:4. It's used often